Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by DK Eyewitness Travel Guides. These colorful guidebooks are filled with great information and are one of my favorite guidebooks. I have 25 of them right here on my bookshelf. Learn more at dk.com.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 469. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about palaces and gardens, nudists, and of course, Oktoberfest as we go to Munich, Germany. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. This is about 4 episodes before our 10-year anniversary. Although I have no particular ideas of how we will celebrate that, I thought you might be interested in knowing. And now, let's talk about Munich. I'd like to welcome to the show Laurel Robbins from monkeysandmountains.com. She is also the local expert on Munich for BBC Travel and, coincidentally enough, has come to talk to us about Munich, Germany. Laurel, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Chris.
So, Munich, Germany, let's put it on the map. First of all, we're talking about southern Germany and Bavaria.
That's correct. Yeah, the capital city of Bavaria.
And the second largest city in Germany, am I correct about that?
Actually, it's the third largest.
Third largest, okay.
Yeah, Berlin and Hamburg are bigger.
Got it. Oh, that makes sense. And why should someone go to Munich? And I think we might as well talk about it. A lot of people, when they hear Munich, they just think of Oktoberfest.
Right.
Let's start with Oktoberfest. Should I go to Oktoberfest? Why and who should go there? And then why should I go other times of the year?
Okay, I think everybody should go to Oktoberfest at least once in their life. It's the world's largest beer festival in the world. It's crazy. You're probably going to enjoy it a little bit more if you're 20, maybe early 30s. But even if you're a little bit older, you can still have a great time with Oktoberfest. Having said that, as a local, I probably go twice every year. As a local, you have to go. It's a little bit too rowdy for my taste, but it's just great fun. Doesn't matter how old you are. People are dancing on the tables, drinking beer. So you really go for the atmosphere.
And does it matter if I don't like beer?
No, but it's a lot more expensive actually if you don't like beer, because a Matha beer, which is about a liter of beer, it costs about €10. And so if you're drinking something other than beer, I don't drink beer, I drink wine, then you're really overpaying for that, whether it's a Coke or whether it's wine. If you are drinking non-alcoholic, some beer tents will, if you say you're the designated driver, they will give you free beverages, but you have to check that out beforehand.
Oh, interesting. Good to know. And besides drinking beer, I get the impression it's a large festival. Are there other things to do besides drink and sing? And
Yeah, actually, my favorite thing for Oktoberfest is they have a parade leading to Oktoberfest. And that's amazing because you have lots of traditional bands, traditional costumes. The mayor's there. That I think is absolutely fabulous, and that's great for families as well. And they have rides. They have amazing rides. So the rides that are, the roller coasters that you're turning around on, everything like that. And I recommend going on the rides during the day, ideally on a Wednesday afternoon, because then you don't have to wait in line. If you go in the evenings or in the weekends, it's just a lot busier, and you're going to have to wait in line.
and I naively assumed that Oktoberfest was in October.
Yeah, actually, it used to be, and the reason that they moved it, well, part of it is in October, but more of it is in September, is because of the weather. Because it's a lot more fun when it's outside. And they said, okay, well, we have, it's usually a little bit warm in September, so we're just going to move it up a little bit.
And you mentioned the weather being better in September. When is your favorite time of the year to be in Munich?
Either spring or fall. I think spring and fall are both amazing in Munich. And it's a great time to visit Munich as well because it's not as busy with tourists, the hotels are not as expensive, and the weather is usually fairly good. Not today, we've got rain today, but in June.
I'd take your rain gladly. And what should we do when we come to Munich?
The first thing you want to do in Munich, it's very iconic, is visit Marienplatz. It's called the Altrathaus, which is the Alt and the Neues Rathaus, which is the old and the new
old city
town
hall.
hall. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And so you want to start around there and either rent a bike or go for a walk. I personally like doing it by foot. On foot, you can visit the 3 remaining city gates. There were 4 city gates at one point. Now there is 3. And walk and visit those gates. You can also visit the Munich residence, which is one of the largest palaces in Europe, which, to be honest, it doesn't look that impressive from the outside, but inside it's absolutely spectacular.
And the largest palaces, so this would be a Habsburg palace, or whose palace is it?
So the Munich residence is one of the largest palaces in Europe, and it's the former residence of the Bavarian monarchs of the House of Wittelsbach. So it's really, really impressive.
Okay. And is that someplace that I assume we'd take a tour?
Yeah, so you can either do a self-guided tour or you can do a guided tour. I've only done the self-guided tour. It's an audio guided tour, so for me that was enough, but obviously you could go with a tour guide if you wanted to do that. And from there you'd want to walk through the Hofgarten, which is the royal garden, and you walk to the English garden. And something you have to see in Munich, which surprises everybody, is their surfers. In the middle of the city, in the river, it's on this standing wave. And it's amazing because you can go there in January. It'll be freezing, it'll be snowing, and the surfers are there. Obviously in summer, there's more surfers, and you can find it really easily because there's always a crowd of people watching the surfers.
Excellent. Yeah, I've heard that, and the first time I heard it, I was surprised, but definitely seems like something to see.
It's so cool, and they're really, really hardcore. The wave doesn't look that big to me. I'm not a surfer, but from what I've been told by friends, that you have to actually be a really, really good surfer. And there's some peer pressure as well because you have a crowd of, on a hot summer day, 500 people watching you, judging you. Oh, you're not as good as that guy. You weren't as good as the guy before you. So there's a lot of pressure for them.
Well, and my impression is that, like so much of Europe in the summer, that the residents of Munich really do enjoy getting out and enjoying the outdoor spaces in the city.
Absolutely. Müncheners, as they're called, are really, really active. In Munich alone, there's over 1,200 kilometers of bike paths. So on the weekends, actually, the locals usually leave the city because they want to be out in the mountains or in one of the Great Lakes doing things. There's just so many things in the surrounding area, and so locals are always outside. It's also a really, really friendly bike city, so that's another great thing to do in Munich is you can do a bike tour, either self-guided or one of the organized ones. A lot of locals don't have a car, and they just cycle to work, and they use it to get exercise, and it's their means of transportation. So cycling's a great way to feel like a local.
And is there a bike tour that you recommend?
There's Mike's Bikes tours, which I've heard really great things about, but to be honest, I haven't gone with them.
Okay, excellent. What else should we see while we're in Munich?
One of my favorite things, which a lot of people don't go to, it's the oldest residential building in Munich, and it's in the Oktoberfest Museum. Now, the Oktoberfest Museum itself, if you don't speak German, you're not going to get a lot out of it. It's okay, but what I really like there is the pub. The pub is the oldest residential building in Munich, and just this really quaint, quintessential pub, great service, really great traditional Bavarian food. And that's something a lot of people don't go to because they're busier going to the bigger beer gardens, which are also fantastic, but that's definitely worth checking out. And we are in Munich, so we have to talk about beer. There's a couple hundred beer gardens in the city, so you'll have no shortage of beer gardens. There's 6 main breweries. They all have their beer gardens, and those are really worth going to as well, along with some of the smaller ones. And at all the beer gardens and the breweries, you can get really great traditional Bavarian food.
And since you're drinking wine at the beer fest, I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask about a favorite brewery.
Yeah, unfortunately, in terms of that, I'm allergic to beer, so I really don't
Oh,
know.
wow. Okay. Wheat allergy or...
Yeah, it's a gluten allergy.
Mhm.
So the bread in Munich is absolutely, well, and all of Germany is absolutely incredible. So I'm living in the wrong country to be allergic to beer and to bread.
And then you mentioned the Bavarian food, and you say Bavarian, I think, Weisswurst. I don't know sure what else I would be eating in Bavaria.
Yes, traditionally, Weisswurst was only eaten in the morning, and that was so that the meat wouldn't go bad. But when you eat Weisswurst, it's usually served with a pretzel and a massive beer, which is a liter of beer. So that's how you start off the day. And it's interesting because in my company's or my husband's company, they still do this. So every second Friday, they have a Weisswurst breakfast. So it's a tradition that is very much alive. But they mix the beer, so it's half beer and half lemonade, since they still have to go to work for the rest of the day. So yeah, the Weisswurst tradition is very much alive. You can get it at other points later on in the day, but especially if you live here, then people are going to be making jokes like, oh, you're not a tourist, you should know better. It's the wrong time of day to be eating Weisswurst.
Okay. This is like drinking a cappuccino after 10 o'clock in Italy. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, same thing.
And what should I get for lunch or for dinner then?
Schnitzel is very, very popular. Lots of different kinds of schnitzels.
And I actually should have you define what schnitzel is. I said, oh yeah, as if everybody would know, but that isn't necessarily true.
Sure. So in Germany, it's usually a really thin pork meat that's been beaten down and tenderized, and then it's breaded with breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good. Sometimes it's served on its own. Sometimes it's served with different sauces. There's so many different kinds of schnitzel that you can get. You can get the Hunter schnitzel. You can get the schnitzel with mushroom sauce. You name it. There's lots of different kinds of schnitzel. Something else, which some people aren't so sure about, but it's worth trying, is a Schweinehaxen, which is the pork knuckles.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. And one of my favorites, which I'm allergic to, but I can make at home, is the Käsespätzle, which I like to call like the German macaroni and cheese. So it's homemade noodles, which are smothered in more cheese than you could ever imagine. And usually covered with a little bit of bacon bits. It's absolutely delicious.
Now, with that being Spätzle, is that also fried then?
No, it's not. So
Okay.
It's just noodles that are dropped in water, but it's the cheese sauce that really makes it. You can get it without the cheese, and without that, it's okay. But it's the cheese that really, really makes it.
Excellent. Let's take a break here and hear from our sponsor, who is DK Eyewitness Travel Guides. I don't have a guidebook for Germany right now. I'm surprised that there's that hole in my collection. But speaking of beer, I do have an Ireland guide left over from my trip to Ireland in 2014. And so I thought, well, what do they say about beer? And as I expected, there's an entry on the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin. But what I didn't expect, and one of the reasons that I really love these guides, is a diagram that diagrams the whole process of beer making. Step number 1, Irish barley is prepared in 3 ways: malted, flaked, and roasted to give the distinctive tint. These are all ground together in a grist mill to form a grist, and it goes on to add the hops and put things through centrifuges and tells me about when things have become a stout. And I am just nerdy enough to find this completely fascinating, and I don't even drink beer. But it's one of the reasons that I love the DK Eyewitness Travel Guides, which show me and don't just tell me. You can get your own at dk.com. What's the best way to connect with Munich culture? Modern Munich, not Munich of the Bavarian princes.
Yeah, in general, I would say Germans are more reserved, so it's more difficult to meet people. So the easiest way to meet people is at the beer gardens. And the thing I love about the beer gardens is everybody goes to the beer gardens. So you have everybody from university students to CEOs. And so it's really where the city comes together. And because you're sitting on picnic benches, you ask somebody, is this place free? And so because you're sitting on the same picnic bench with people, then it's just a really great way to start a conversation. And I think as a great thing about being a tourist is people expect, especially for Americans and Canadians, they expect us to be a little bit friendlier. And so if another German was talking to them, they might think, oh, that's kind of weird. But when you're American or Canadian, they're kind of excited to talk to you as well. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're just American, so you're friendly. So it's kind of great because it gives them a really good excuse to be a little bit more open than they normally would be as well.
Is there a local that you wish everybody could meet?
Not one that stands out. There's so many locals that I know personally, which are fabulous people. Probably one of the most famous and eccentric ones is a guy who walks around with a bird. He
Okay.
walks through the entire city with a bird. But I haven't actually had a conversation with him because he's known for being quite strange. So he's definitely one to watch out for. Whether you'd want to speak to him, I'm not so sure. Yeah, he has like a big parrot on the back of his shoulder.
And when they're not at the beer gardens, what else do the Munich residents do besides surf and...
Everybody has a hobby in Munich, well, in Germany. And so everybody belongs to a hobby club.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah, I absolutely love it because that's how Germans socialize. So, for example, if your hobby is cycling, you'll belong to a cycling group. If your hobby is badminton, you'll belong to a badminton club. Everybody has different hobbies, whether it's painting, whatever. Every person, I would say all of my German friends that I know belong to a hobby group based on whatever their interests are.
Like a painting club.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. And it's not just like, oh, I paint once in a while. It's like, no, every Thursday from 7 to 9 o'clock, I go to my painting club.
Now, that's something that an expat can get involved in, but is that something that a tourist can get involved in, though?
With a tourist, it's a little bit trickier because they really, again, Germans, it takes a little while to warm up to them. And so it really is more of a long-term relationship. So that definitely is a little bit trickier. That's why I think the beer gardens are really good. The other thing is Müncheners love their football. Soccer is what we would say in North America. And a lot of times they have public viewings. And those are a really great chance. Sometimes they're in big fields. Sometimes, they're in big beer gardens. That's a really great way to connect with the locals as well, because I know a lot of Americans also really enjoy soccer.
A public viewing, meaning a game that you don't need a ticket for?
Usually they charge you for a ticket, but
Okay.
you get to see the game on an absolutely huge screen and be part of that atmosphere.
Okay. Got it. So maybe an away game or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, if Munich is playing, then the crowd is just going to be going crazy. And that's just really fun as a tourist to see how crazy locals go when their team is playing. And there's a lot of soccer games here, so it's great.
Excellent. What do the guidebooks recommend from Munich that you personally would not recommend?
For me, the one thing that every guidebook will recommend, which is not my favorite thing to do, is the Hofbrauhaus. And that's one of the main breweries in Munich. It's very famous because that was where the Nazi party used to meet. And so that's why people want to go. I know maybe 2 locals that actually go there. Most locals do not go there because when you walk in, you hear much more English than you do German. And I think there's so many other amazing breweries and beer gardens you can go to. You might want to go check it out, but then be like, okay, now I'm going to go eat somewhere else. I'm going to go hang out somewhere else.
So somewhere else, where do you take your friends when they come, for instance?
The Augustiner Beer Garden is fabulous. So it's one of Munich's most rustic beer gardens. And the great thing is that they also have an inside. So if the weather starts to rain, then you can go inside. I also like the Park Cafe, which is another beer garden / restaurant for the same reason. You can start outside, and if it gets a little bit chilly, then you can move inside.
Okay. Any museums or cultural things that you would recommend in Munich?
Yeah, the Deutsches Museum is one of the most well-respected science museums in all of Europe. So it's absolutely huge. Something kids really, really like because they have lots of interactive exhibits. There's also a planetarium there. That one is really popular. The Bavarian State Museum is absolutely gorgeous. I think it's one of the most beautiful buildings in all of Munich. And if you go there, you'll get a really good sense of Bavaria and the culture.
And are those two accessible to those of us whose German is nicht so gut?
I'm impressed, Chris. Yeah, some of the signs are in English, not all of them, but I would say enough of the signs are in English that you're going to be able to enjoy them.
Okay.
Yeah, and in addition to that, the Munich residence is also considered a museum. So that is also worth seeing. And there's also another palace, which I love, which is Schloss Nymphenburg, which is another palace in the city, which is from the grounds. It's absolutely incredible. It's worth spending, a half day there, especially if you go at sunrise or sunset. It's absolutely beautiful. And then you go inside there, you can do a palace tour on your own. And then they have different museums as well. So they have an old carriage museum. They have a porcelain museum. So that's a really good way. You can easily spend a day there if you're going to do all the museums.
Now, how long have you lived in Munich?
I've lived here almost 4 years.
And what surprised you when you first came to Munich?
For me, I was living in Stuttgart before, which is another city in Bavaria. I was surprised at how friendly people were. So when I first came here, I didn't know what I was doing, had my map out, looking like the confused tourist I was. People would ask, can I help you? People are really, really friendly. Again, not the kind of friendly that we're used to in North America, but I would say, in terms of Germany, I would say people are really, really friendly. And the other thing I really appreciate is that people take their hobbies very seriously. And so I think that's really interesting. People really don't watch that much TV, but they're very passionate about something. If you ask a German, what is your hobby, which is a great conversation starter, people will tell you about their hobby. And you can just see the passion when they talk about that. And that's something I really, really love about Munich.
And if you had to describe the perfect one-day Munich experience, what would it be?
I would either do a walking tour or bike tour,
Okay.
starting at Marienplatz, going up to the residence, hanging out in the English Garden, which is absolutely incredible. There's 4 different beer gardens in the English Garden, which is over 12 kilometers long. So
Oh, wow.
that you probably want a bike for, unless you're going to be a very long day if you're walking. And it's just a really great way, hanging out in the English Garden, it's just a really great way to see how locals live, because that's what locals do when they are in the city, is they will hang out at the English Garden. I do have to warn you, though, there's one section of the English Garden where clothing is optional. If you don't want to see that, you might want to avoid that part, because it might be more than you bargained for.
Excellent. And more so in the summer than the winter, I'm assuming. So
Yeah, exactly. It's quite interesting. There's also parts along the Isar River where you can see that. And just to kind of show you a little bit about the culture with that, is some days, when it's really hot out, the people in the nude part of the park, they will go for a swim. And then they take the train back. Obviously, they're naked because they went for a swim. And the problem that Müncheners find is not that they're riding the train in the middle of the day, no clothes on. It's because they're riding without a ticket. Because Germans are very, very rural with it. So I think that kind of sums up the attitude about how open people are.
That is funny. You're standing in the prettiest spot in all of Munich. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I was just there recently, and because I think sometimes when you live in a place, you think you're, too cool to go visit a place, and it's at the top of St. Peter's Church, which is the oldest church in Munich, and it's about 300 stairs to get up there. So you're definitely going to have to work to get up there, but it's an incredible view. If you've ever seen a postcard of Munich, you've probably seen it, and you will find it in every guidebook, but it's absolutely beautiful. That would be one of my number one choices, and the other one is in Olympic Park. And this one is a free one, and so you can just walk up. It's just a small little mountain, hill really, that you walk up. They call it a mountain, but it's really a small little hill, and you get gorgeous views over Munich. And that one is not nearly a steep climb. That's something almost everybody would be able to do.
Okay, excellent. Is there anything else we should do in Munich before we start talking about getting out of the city a little bit?
Go for a bike ride along the Isar River. So like I mentioned before, Müncheners are really, really active, and that's something people love to do. There's beer gardens along the river, so you can cycle for an hour, hang out at a beer garden, cycle for another hour, hang out at a cafe. And when I mention beer gardens, I make it sound like everyone's getting drunk, but that definitely isn't the case. So of course you can get beer there, but they're also very family friendly. So most beer gardens have a playground as well. It's really a place for the community to come together.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of getting out of the city, you mentioned the Great Lakes, and I'm assuming we're not going to the American Midwest when you say the Great Lakes from Munich. So.
No, not that far. There's a lot of really wonderful lakes around Munich. So one that's very accessible from Munich is called Starnberger See, which is Starnberger Lake, and you can reach that from the S-Bahn, which is the local train system directly from Munich. That'll take you about half an hour to get outside. There's also Ammersee, the Ammer Lake, which is also really good. And so those are really accessible just from within Munich. You literally get on the train and you get off at that stop.
Okay. And then you say S-Bahn, which in Germany would be the Straßenbahn, so the above-ground streetcar. Is there also an U-Bahn? Is there also a subway system?
So sorry, when I'm talking about the S-Bahn, this is actually the underground one. There's also the U-Bahn, and then we also have the Straßenbahn, which is the one on the street.
Okay, got it.
But the great thing is, once you have your ticket for that, you're covered for all 3 of those, plus buses as well. So it doesn't matter which one you're taking, it's all the same ticket. So that part of it's really easy.
Excellent. And it sounds like walking, taking public transportation, or renting a bike is the easiest way to get around here.
Absolutely. Driving in Munich is a little bit scary if you haven't done it. And for me, I've got a driver's license here, but I never drive because the parking spots are so small. I think in North America, we're used to such great big parking spots, and here they're tiny, tiny, tiny. And Germans are very particular about their cars, especially in Munich, so you don't dare hit anyone's cars. So I can drive, but I don't because I can't actually park the car anywhere, especially if you're in the city center. And you pay a fortune for parking in the city center as well.
And then if you were to get to 1 or 2 other sites out of Munich, what would you recommend?
The one that a lot of people love is Neuschwanstein, which is the castle that Disney was based off of. It's probably one of my least favorite.
And that's a little far from Munich, isn't it? Is that a couple hours?
I think it's probably a couple hours, hour and a half by train.
Oh, it's that close. Okay. Over in Füssen.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you know your geography. I'm impressed.
I've been to Neuschwanstein and Hochschwangau.
Okay. Something that is, definitely very doable. Most people that come to Munich do that for a day trip. I think the castle is absolutely beautiful from the outside, but the King Ludwig Castle that I like so much better is called Herrenchiemsee, and it's on an island. So you take the train to a town called Prieninchiemsee, and then you take a little boat across to this island, and it was based on the Palace of Versailles. So it's absolutely incredible. And it costs more than King Ludwig's other two castles combined. So it's completely opulent. And so you can hang out there for a day. There's also a little beer garden that you hang out with. It's a short little walk to get to the palace. And then what I like to do is you can take a boat. It's maybe a 5-minute boat ride to another island called Fraueninsel, which is a nunnery. And they're really, really famous for their fresh fish, which is straight from the lake. And so it just makes for a really fantastic day trip.
And out of curiosity, do you happen to know if this is the lake where King Ludwig drowned under suspicious circumstances at the end of his life?
Yeah, so that wasn't the Chiemsee. That was actually the Starnberger See, which I mentioned earlier.
I've got it.
And when you go to the Starnberger See, I should have mentioned that you can walk there from the town. It's a few kilometer walk from the town. And they've got a beautiful memorial there. And then in the water, there's a little cross, depending how high the water is, to show exactly where he was drowned.
Now I noticed you say was drowned instead of drowned, but
yeah,
you have a conclusion that you have reached about that.
Yeah, I think most locals probably think that he was murdered. You look at the circumstances; it seems a little fishy, but you're absolutely right. Nobody knows 100% sure.
Excellent. Before we get to our last 3 questions or so, anything else we should know about Munich before we head there?
I mentioned Olympia Park. Olympia Park is a great place to go. In the summer, what's really great about that is they have an outdoor cinema. Now, at that one, a lot of the movies are in German, but also at West Park, they also have an outdoor cinema. And that one has a few more movies that are in English. So you just need to check the local listings because that's just a really great experience. The movies usually start around 10 o'clock, 10:30. And so to watch a movie under the stars is something a lot of locals do. It's just a really cool experience in summer.
Excellent. 4 last questions. 1, your best money-saving tip for Munich.
It would probably be during Oktoberfest, and that would be to stay in an Airbnb or one of the apartment rentals that you can stay in, because the hotel prices for Oktoberfest go up over 200%. It's absolutely crazy how much hotels cost here. And there's so many people that are willing to rent their house out, and then that way you get the local experience as well.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Munich.
I think it would be the story I told earlier about the naked people taking the train and the locals being upset that they're riding without a ticket. Not the fact that they're naked at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon and there's children and everybody else is on the train with clothes. But that's one of those things I'm like, yeah, only in Munich.
Excellent. Last 2 questions. Finish the sentence. You really know you're in Munich when what?
There's a beer garden on every corner. And literally is a beer garden on every corner or a brewery. It's absolutely amazing. Like I said, there's at least 200, and I think that number is probably being quite conservative. I live in a really residential area, and there's probably 4 within walking distance from where I live. And that's in super residential.
Interesting. And if you had to summarize Munich in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Traditional,
okay,
proud, and outdoorsy.
Excellent. Laurel, where can people read more about your travels?
At monkeysandmountains.com.
And what's the most interesting story you've done recently at monkeysandmountains.com, which, by the way, just does make me giggle every time I hear you.
That's good. I wanted to do that with the name. I've done some cool, interesting things, but the thing I'm really excited about that I'm doing is I'm going to be cycling across Finland, 1,200 kilometers on the Iron Curtain Trail starting next week. Excellent,
although no monkeys.
No monkeys. I'm hoping there's not mountains because I'm going to be cycling. This is actually one time in my life where I don't want to see any mountains. I only want flat roads. So we'll see how that works out. And I'm so excited about that because I didn't start cycling until 6 weeks ago.
Oh, and my. So, okay.
Yeah. I'm a big hiker. I'm in the Alps every weekend, love to hike. But I'm really excited about this. And I think that's one great thing about travel is, it pushes you to try new things and pushes you out of your comfort zone.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Laurel Robbins. Laurel, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for your adopted city of Munich.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
Or München. We only vaguely referred to it.
Yes, that's true. München.
We're still looking for feedback on where to go with the next Amateur Traveler trip, and there's no consensus yet, so we need your feedback. And you can do that by joining the Facebook group, Amateur Traveler Trips, and then you'll find a link to a SurveyMonkey survey, which will ask you about what destinations we should go to, how much you think it should cost, and all of those important factors. This week I got one of the most interesting emails that I've received in terms of feedback from the show. It didn't come to me. It came actually to our guest for the episode on Ho Chi Minh City, which was Jody Ettenberg. And Jody got a letter from Conrad, and Conrad said, "Hey there, I listened to a podcast you made on Ho Chi Minh City as a transport planner who also studied in Montreal. It made me really want to visit, so I chose to write my thesis on transport integration and motorcycle taxis in Ho Chi Minh City. Hoping to interview loads of locals, booked my flights yesterday, super excited to visit and discover Vietnamese food. There's not a purpose to this message other than to thank you and to encourage you to keep writing. Smile emoticon, all the best." And as Jody wrote me, how awesome is that? His whole thesis because of us. And as far as I know, in the almost 10 years of Amateur Traveler, that has got to be a first. One of the things that would be interesting to know as the 10-year anniversary approaches is, have you gone anywhere because of the Amateur Traveler? Have you booked any tickets because of something you heard about on the show? Or have you potentially changed your master's thesis? Let me know, won't you? With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, Pinterest, or Instagram as Chris2X. And as always, thanks so much for listening.